What if I told you that behind the plaster and gold of ancient Egyptian temples lay secrets darker than any tomb? That the gods people worshipped were not always benevolent guardians, but shadowy figures of power, terror, and hidden rituals? Tonight, we push beyond the glimmering facade of ancient Egypt to explore the unsettling, often overlooked dimensions of its deities. Those ancient beings who commanded devotion, fear, and mystery in equal measure. Welcome to Dark Secrets of Ancient Egypt. It's about the hidden truth of the Egyptian gods. Our journey takes us into hidden chambers, banned hieroglyphs, and the unsettling corners of divine myth, where power and dread entwined like serpents around the pillars of civilization. Our story begins in the golden age of the pharaohs. The shimmering sands of the Nile, the mighty pyramids of Giza, the grand temples dedicated to the gods, all of these evoke awe and wonder. But there is a side rarely shown in the glossy postcards. In the vast temples of Amun-Ra, Isis and Osiris, priests performed rituals by candlelight, chanting ancient formulas to channel the god's power into the body of the pharaoh. They were not mere ceremonies. They were acts of dominance, negotiation, and cosmic control. Consider this: the very gods of Egypt were catalogued, ranked, and sometimes feared. While a god might grant life and harvest, the same god could doom an unworthy soul, send plagues, or condemn the foolish, sometimes simply for the entertainment of the divine court. And when humans attempted to imitate or manipulate that power, the consequences were unpredictable. Let's meet one such deity, Sekhmet, the lioness goddess of war and destruction. Legend says she was created by Ra's own fiery eye to punish the unruly, and once unleashed, she nearly destroyed all humanity. In one ancient tale, humankind angered the sun god. His eye turned into Sekhmet, and she rampaged across the earth, slaying thousands. Only a plan of intoxication saved humanity. The gods dyed beer red to look like blood. Sekhmet mistook drink for slaughter, downed it, and fell asleep, thus sparing mortal life. Imagine the psychological power of that myth. Sekhmet is not the kindly goddess of gentle healing. She is a ravening force, divine retribution made flesh. Temples built in her honor didn't just celebrate life, they trembled before it. Priests invoked her during epidemics and conflict, hoping to restrain her rage or redirect it. The walls of her sanctuaries often bore warnings: beware the one who strikes with fire. What does it say about a civilization when its gods include such terrifying figures? That the sacred and the savage were inseparable. The divine wasn't only comfort. It was a frightening realm where even the gods could turn. Let's now journey to the hidden margins of the divine, the realm beneath the earth, the underworld where gods and men both dared not tread. In Egyptian myth, that domain belongs to Anubis, Osiris, and other shadow figures who judge the dead. But there may have been more, secret deities whispered about in temple corridors, unseen by tourists. Gods of chaos, disorder, and silence. One candidate, Set, the god of storms, deserts, and violence. He killed Osiris, dressed in deceit, and embodied the inversion of order. In temple inscriptions, we see warnings about Set's influence. In tombs, guardians invoked spells. May Set not overturn your heart. The Nile floods, the desert storms, they weren't just natural phenomena. They were divine armaments. Hidden behind official worship were mystery cults and esoteric rites dedicated to these darker gods. Initiates were led through elaborate sequences: darkness, fire, the breaking of idols, and the emergence into a new vision of the divine. These were not safe rituals. They were transformational, sometimes terrifying. Consider the idea: a person stepping into a chamber of darkness, surrounded by statues of chaos and silence, chanting in the dead language of gods, undergoing a symbolic death, then emerging into the sun with a new identity. This was not mere religion. It was a dramatic performance of transformation, and it leaves us asking, how many such rites remain unknown? How many gods were feared rather than loved? The Egyptians didn't just worship gods, they dreamed of becoming them. The pharaoh was divine. Akhenaten, Tutankhamun, Ramesses II, All claimed a direct link to the gods, and in some cases, they asserted divine status themselves. When a pharaoh took on the mantle of a god, he faced enormous risk. Because gods had prerogatives, they could judge, punish, resurrect, or destroy. If a pharaoh assumed their role improperly, or the priests believed him a usurper, the consequences could ripple through eternity. One infamous example: in the later period of Egyptian history, foreign invaders like the Delta, Egypt region's Libyans and Nubians sought to legitimize their rule by aligning with certain gods. The interplay of power, legitimacy, and divine sanction became a battlefield. The gods were both shields and weapons in political games. Temples became economic empires. Priests controlled land, slaves, and wealth. A pharaoh who challenged that power might find himself opposed, not only by human opponents, but by the wrath of the gods themselves, no less real in the minds of the people. To be God-king is to sit beside eternity, but it also means you can fall beside it. Let's dive deeper into the papyri and carvings that weren't meant for the casual visitor. Many temple inscriptions show only the surface: hymns of praise, pyramid texts, funerary spells. But what about the scribbles in back chambers, the eroded walls of lesser-known shrines? Archaeologists have found texts that mention the hour of the nether serpent, the chamber beyond the three gates, and the hand that opens the sky. These phrases evoke something uncanny, secrets about the gods that aren't in the main tours. One such text mentioned, "When Ra descends and the four pillars tremble, the god of shadows opens the door, and the hearts of men falter." What does that mean? Was it a mythic metaphor or a literal ritual enacted in dark hollows of the temple? In the sands around Thebes and Luxor, explorers have unearthed graffiti that depicts strange faces, hybrid gods with falcon heads and goat horns, and cryptic signs. These may point to syncretic deities, less public, more dangerous. Think of them as the black gods of Egypt, those who slipped between the lines of official religion, who operated in the night, in secret. Their worship may have been outlawed, suppressed, or simply lost, but traces remain. Every myth has a turning point. For the sun god Ra and gods of Egypt, one of the darkest chapters involves his rebellion and descent into the underworld every night. When Ra boards the solar bark, heading into the realm of monsters and chaos, he must fight the serpent Apophis, the great enemy of light. The battle of the sun and serpent is more than a story. It represents the daily fight between order and chaos, between the visible and the hidden. But it also suggests that the gods themselves live in fear, not of humans, but of other gods. Some temple reliefs show Ra's bark engulfed in storm and fire. Others show grotesque creatures tugging at its ends. This hidden journey to the underworld may signify that even the gods must traverse danger, suffer betrayal, and risk annihilation. One myth records, in the house of the Mountain of Twilight, Ra is stripped of his glory and must wait upon the gods of the West. That image, a sun god cast low, waiting in twilight, flips the common narrative of divinity always supreme. And under that twilight, in the hidden chambers, priests may have reenacted the feast of the sun's death, offering animal sacrifices, reciting spells of resurrection, performing the drama of annihilation and rebirth. This was not benign worship. It was cosmic theater, and for the initiated, it was terrifying. We usually think about gods as distant, perfect beings. But in ancient Egypt, the relationship between gods and humans was often deeply personal and perilous. The priests held the power to mediate, but also to misinterpret, mislead, or manipulate. The common people believed that if the gods were angered, they would bring famine, plague, or even unnatural death. And there is archaeological evidence of masses of amulets and charms, many depicting fearsome gods intended not for worship, but for protection. Consider the profession of the magician-priest. These men and women would call upon the night gods, those whose names were spoken in hushed tones, the goddess of midnight, the god of hidden waters, the serpent of darkness. Their incantations promised not only healing, but also curses and vengeance. Records show individuals using spells such as "May the left hand of the god fall upon him," or "May the one who walks in silence devour his soul." These aren't flowery prayers. They are direct invocations of divine violence, wielded through human hands. It begs the question, did ordinary Egyptians truly fear their gods? Or did they fear the priests who claimed to command them? The line between divine favor and divine wrath was thin. Then there's the symbol we all recognize, the Eye of Horus. Universally used as a protective emblem, found in amulets around the world. But did you know that the myth behind it involves sacrifice, mutilation, and restoration? In one telling, Horus loses his eye in a battle with Set. That eye is severed, scattered, then reunited and healed, becoming a symbol of wholeness. But what if that story was also a warning? Temples carved the Eye of Horus next to depictions of Osiris's body, torn and reassembled. The message is dual. Healing, but also the reminder of chaos, of body broken, of power lost and regained. When you wore the Eye of Horus, you were tapping into that narrative, not just of protection, but of the precariousness of divine blessing. Temple inscriptions warn, "The eye sees the unworthy, the eye judges the trespasser." These warnings suggest that the symbol carried more than hopeful meaning. It carried a divine vigilance. So next time someone says the Eye of Horus is just a pretty symbol of good luck, think of its darker side, the eye that lost its form, the eye that returns with wrath. Many of the key mysteries of ancient Egypt lie underground, not in the grand tombs of kings, but in lesser-known catacombs, crypts, and subterranean temples. These were the places where the official light of the sun could not reach, and the gods of shadow reigned. In one example, archaeologists explored a chamber beneath a temple complex near the modern site of Abydos. They found strange depictions: serpents entwined with gods, human figures half animal, hieroglyphs reading, "The one who is unseen, the one who hears without ears." Could these represent deities not meant for ordinary worship? The very act of entering these spaces was taboo for most. Initiates were blindfolded, torches extinguished, the air thick with incense and dread. The ritual was, by design, a descent into the other side of the sacred. The implications. Some of Egypt's gods were intentionally hidden. Their worship was secret, and the knowledge of them was limited to a few. We often see the polite, museum-style versions of Egyptian religion, but beneath that, there were priesthoods, conducting rites that ordinary people only whispered of. Why does this matter in our age of LED screens and social media? Because the dark side of ancient power still echoes in modern human psyche. The idea of a deity who demands, punishes, and reveals in shadows is not limited to one civilization. It's part of our story. Understanding the darker aspects of the Egyptian gods helps us see how humans relate to what they cannot control. It reminds us that worship often mingles hope with fear, that power often wears two faces, one of promise, one of menace. And for you, the viewer, this story invites reflection. What gods, or godlike forces, do we believe in today? How do we handle the unknown, the hidden, the parts of ourselves we do not wish to see? When we dismiss the symbolic darkness of these ancient myths, we risk forgetting that oppression, secrecy, and power disguised as righteousness have always existed. Let's walk now, metaphorically, into one of the great temples. Temple walls rising, reliefs carved with images of gods and their beasts, the air scented with myrrh and papyrus. At the entrance stand two massive statues, one of a lioness, Sekhmet, and one of a man carrying the Ankh. Between them, the threshold. Step inside. Torch flickers on, and the architecture guides you deeper. Here you see reliefs of the sun god in his chariot, the serpent of chaos, the weighing of the heart in the judgment hall. At the far end, a dark corridor leads to a sealed chamber, a place the common visitor did not enter. Inside that chamber, we imagine, are walls painted red, inscriptions etched in the language of secrets. He who enters must surrender the self. A statue of a deity with no name. A ritual altar with vessels, empty now, that once held blood, wine, or oil for offerings. The silent space reverberates with the memories of those who performed rituals in darkness. Initiates clad in linen, chanting in rhythmic cadence, guiding a soul toward transformation. Not simply from life to death, but from ignorance to revelation. And just for a moment, if you close your eyes, you hear the desert wind through columns, the distant hoot of an owl, the soft splash of the Nile beyond. Your heart beats a little faster because you sense that you are standing at the boundary of the known and the secret. Let's shine a light on some lesser-known deities who embody the dark side of the divine. Apep, also Apophis, the giant serpent of chaos, enemy of Ra, who dwells in the underworld and fights the sun each night. He is not worshipped in the traditional sense. He is feared. Amit, the devourer of the unworthy dead's hearts. Part crocodile, part lion, part hippopotamus, a monstrous judge in the weighing of hearts seen. Nehebkau, the serpent god of the underworld, guardian of the gates and secrets of regeneration, yet also a figure of greed and hunger. These deities force us to ask, what happens when the divine is not benevolent? When the god is not a symbol of your hope, but your dread? To navigate these mysteries, we must turn to the human intermediaries, the priests and priestesses who acted as translators between mortal and divine. In the temple schools of ancient Egypt, these priests studied mathematics, astronomy, magic, and ritual. Many climbed social ranks quickly, and thus, the power they wielded was both spiritual and political. They held the keys to the gods. They interpreted omens, controlled secret texts, knew which chants opened the sealed doors. A single priest might hold the authority to call on a destructive god to punish an enemy, or to appease that very same god for protection. But with that power came risk. When the Roman and Greek eras encroached and Egyptian religious structures changed, many of these secrets were lost, suppressed, or transformed. Some were deliberately destroyed by reforming pharaohs who wanted to erase older cults. We find inscriptions erased, statues smashed, ritual altars dismantled. It is as though the hidden side of Egypt wanted to vanish, yet fragments remain, a testament to the priest's power centuries ago. One of the most haunting images in Egyptian religion is that of death and rebirth. The story of Osiris being killed, dismembered by Set, resurrected by Isis, becoming ruler of the underworld. This is a myth that comforts, but also unsettles. What does it mean to be dead yet alive, to rule the realm of the dead yet still breathe, to be the sun god yet fade into darkness each night? The Egyptian gods inhabited contradictions, and thus the rituals surrounding them were often paradoxical. In some tombs, we find paintings of the deceased king blended into Osiris, with heads crowned like serpents, bodies wrapped like mummies. It suggested the king had become god-dead. He had died, yet continued. And here lies the secret. The divine rebirth was both hope and threat. Hope because you could continue. Threat because your identity could be erased, changed, merged, subsumed by the divine. The boundary between you and the god could vanish. The shadows of this belief survive in the corridors of mysticism across time. And ancient Egypt remains one of the primary mirrors of our own fascination with immortality, transformation, and the unknown. When we visit the temples today, like those at Luxor Temple, Karnak, and the pyramids at Giza, we see the grandeur. We take selfies with the statues. We marvel at the technical achievement. But what we often miss is the tension behind the grandeur, the fear, the awe, the rituals conducted by torchlight in hidden rooms. The gods of night and storm quietly standing beside the gods of light and land. The ancient Egyptians understood something we often overlook, that power has two faces, that divinity can comfort but also condemn, and that in worship, There is always an element of surrender, sometimes peaceful, sometimes terrifying. As modern humans, we might prefer the cheerful, benevolent gods. But the ancient ones were more complex. They demanded, they devoured. They protected only if you followed the rules, and maybe that is the deeper secret. That what we call God is a projection of our greatest hopes and our deepest fears. So what have we uncovered on this journey? We've walked the corridors of power and peril. We've seen gods who heal and gods who destroy. We've seen human priests who channel divine wrath and mercy. We've glimpsed hidden cults, secret chambers, and ancient texts whispering of an unseen world. The deities of ancient Egypt were not childish symbols or simple characters. They were complex, terrifying, transcendent. They embodied the mysteries of existence, life and death, order and chaos, known and hidden. And their legacy remains with us, not just in archaeology, but in our imaginations. When you look at a lioness-headed goddess or a serpent coiled around a sunbark, remember, you're witnessing a story of power, fear, and the human longing to touch the infinite. As we close this episode, I invite you, return to those images of Egyptian gods. Instead of seeing only artifacts, see living beings. See the fear they inspired, the rituals they demanded, the hidden gods waiting in the dark. Let the quiet weight of their presence remind you that history is not always safe. It is often restless, mysterious, and full of shadow. Thank you for joining me on this expedition into the dark secrets of ancient Egyptian deities. If you enjoyed this journey, don't forget to like, subscribe, and tap the bell so we can continue exploring the forgotten mystery.